The thing with psychoanalysis is that there's just one rule, which is that you have to say everything that you think, which at the time was really important for me because coming out of suicidal tendencies and this kind of depressive period, my identity was extremely fractured, and I felt extremely anxious when I was speaking. I didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't really trust the words that were going to come out of my mouth. So being in an environment where the only rule is to say everything that's on your mind, it was like exactly what I needed.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sheri Jacobson, and this is THERAPYLAB, a podcast dedicated to demystifying therapy, mental health, and the art of well-being. In this episode, we are joined by social entrepreneur George Taktak to talk about his personal experiences. When we say, how are you? It's often a superficial answer, as I'm fine. How are you really today?
Good question. I like that. I love it because when you actually consider how you're feeling, you have to kind of drop into it. Actually, lately I've been feeling really like I'm moving forward in my life. Some big next steps, a lot of vulnerability, and I think that's a really good thing. So I'm quite proud of myself, which is not something I get to say very often. So that's how I feel.
Well, you said it to begin with.
Yay.
Here first. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what are you up to?
So obviously the way that we met is because I work in the mental health space. I think that it's interesting because mental health as a sort of general topic was not something that had ever really featured in my life, or I'd never really considered it. Even though I had quite a traumatic childhood, my dad was very abusive, and I only really named that as trauma quite recently. But relationships, helping to coordinate a family and make sure that everyone's well-being was priority, was something that I've always done. And a few years ago, my granddad was suffering from Alzheimer's disease, and eventually he actually lost the ability to speak. So when that happened, I realized that whilst he had a mental health condition, mental health itself was so fluid, because it's not only him who was affected, everyone else in my family was also going through something. So just kind of watching how mental health ran through my family made me realize that we needed to support each other. And I actually ended up developing a mobile app to support my granddad, which is called Feeliom. And that's all about helping people to express emotions without the need for words, so that it could, help him. And to be able to support each other and stay connected. And so that kind of opened up this whole world of mental health. I then actually realized that, a lot of people out there are doing amazing, cool, different things to empower each other's well-being. And so I created a community called How Mental, which is all about bringing together all these different people doing their amazing things in the space, so that we can help people find what they need to live their best life.
And what a community it is. You have a tremendous amount of followers. So which came first? Was it the Feeliom app or it was?
It was Feeliom,
Feeliom. So tell me a little bit about how it operates and how you envisage people using it and where you see it going.
So Feeliom is based on what actually allowed me and my granddad to communicate when he had Alzheimer's. And I realized that it wasn't the words that were helping us to communicate, it was actually touch. So it was a hug, it was a kiss, it was being able to feel him. So the language that I created is all around touch. And I actually started delving deeper into touch, you know, how touch is this kind of sense that we take for granted.
Yeah.
You know, we will say like there's a beautiful painting on the wall, or there's an amazing smell that comes into the room, but we never really think, oh wow, it's so great that I can actually sit in this sofa and like realize where I am in space. And so, you know, I started delving deeper into touch and realized that touch itself allows us to communicate emotions. It also releases oxytocin, serotonin, you know, makes us feel closer and bonds us. And it's even been shown to improve our immune system. So they have that with kids in, you know, the sort of kangaroo care where they do skin-to-skin contact with the mother and child. Which, so, you know, using touch, I actually created a language of vibrations through which you can communicate emotion. Which sounds kind of funny. You have to like really feel it to understand it, but it's a really simple kind of use of vibrations, and allows you to just intuitively express how you're feeling and share that with someone else.
Okay. And by the way, touch I think is so important.
Oh, yeah?
Whether it's a hug, whether it's a massage.
Yeah.
However, of course, in the world of therapy, touch is very much not part of it.
Yeah.
So fascinated to hear that it is integrated. Tell us a little bit about, of course, I do want to ask about long-term prospects for Feeliom, but how does one operate it, and is it a sufficient replacement for human-to-human touch?
Okay, so it's never going to be sufficient to replace human-to-human touch. I think that's the thing, which I realized is that ultimately it's just going to be a tool to kind of empower us to connect on a more deep level when we are apart from each other. But obviously the ideal is going to be when you are with someone else at that same moment in time. You know, unfortunately, we just don't have that in this world. You know, everyone is in a different country, everyone is running around, doing their work, doing this and that. But at the very least, we can create better ways to stay in touch, you know, better than being like one bubble on a side of a screen and then a bubble on another side of a screen. It's, you know, we're human beings, there's a lot more to our interaction. And I think, you know, even in terms of what we're doing right now, like, you know, you've got a podcast, but you're also filming it. And that's to give people more deep insight into what this experience is all about. So, so that's what we're trying to do through technology. And in terms of the way that it works, there's a couple of different facets. So you've got the communication of emotions. So that's all using this kind of heartbeat. So it actually, you can feel this heartbeat and share this heartbeat with someone else. And it's through manipulating this heartbeat pattern that we're intuitively able to feel how someone else is feeling. So that's one part of it. But you've also got other parts where you can actually share a hug. So what you do is you take the phone, you press it to your chest, and you actually immerse yourself in this environment by subconsciously hugging yourself. And you know, you receive these vibrations, you get the sound, and it's just about taking that connection to, well, I want to say to new levels, but actually just back to what we can do in person and what reality already provides us. Yeah.
Who are the main users, would you say?
So obviously I started it for my granddad, but funnily enough, and this is something which I find really difficult because a lot of people will say, you know, they want you to have like, this is your niche, you know, you're just going to target these people. But I think that everyone needs help to express emotions. Obviously, some people more than others. And for people with Alzheimer's who, you know, obviously it affects everyone differently. But for those people who struggle to communicate, that's going to be invaluable for them and for their families to be able to connect and for them to be able to self-express. But also actually the people who I am targeting right now and who I feel are the the ones who can really take it to the next level are young people. So 16 to 24-year-olds are the loneliest age group. 40% of them often feel lonely, which is funny when you think like, okay, this is the social media generation. They're so in touch with each other.
Yeah.
Exactly. And and actually the reality is that they're not. And there's a lot of discussion around whether it's because of their age, and we just haven't looked into that much. 16 to 24, you're pretty lost. You're trying to find who you are. And so it's a difficult age as it is, but realistically, you think like they are being social. So what is it that's making them still feel so alone? So I think being able to kind of empower them with a tool that allows them to self-express is going to allow them to overcome the sort of loneliness and isolation which can lead to depression. And depression is a major risk factor for suicide. So I feel like I want to just kind of jump in and help people to keep expressing themselves, especially young people who are so attuned with technology, and help them from a young age to really make this part of their routine, and hopefully stop these more depressive and suicidal tendencies.
So that's Feeliom.com.
Sure.
And then the movement How Mental.
Yeah.
It's got an extraordinary following on social media. Tell us more about that, and also I'm intrigued as to how you built such a follower group.
Yeah. No, it's pretty exciting. I actually built it initially because I was working on Feeliom really hard. At first, the technology wasn't there. People weren't talking about mental health the same way. So everything was kind of slow. And a friend of mine actually said to me, listen, George, like, why don't you like do something else? You can build something, you can do something, like use the skills that you have and whatever you've got with you. So I was in a co-working space and I was listening to someone there talking about the fact that they were depressed, and they didn't know where to go. And I thought, it's funny because knowing the space, knowing the different kind of outlets that you can go to for help, it just felt odd that other people didn't have access to that knowledge. It felt odd that it was so hard for someone to think, like to know where to go when they're depressed, or when they're feeling any kind of way about their mental health.
And what year was this?
This was 2-3 years ago now.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you'd go on, I think for a lot of people as well, like they might go on a charity's website. And I have, no problem with charities. Like I think that they've been able to carry us up till now. But at the same time, a lot of, especially millennials, don't want to go on a charity's website and feel like they are, some kind of charity case when it comes to them taking care of themselves.
Sure.
So I basically just started posting a lot of other people's content on Instagram. I realized that there's a lot of people who are talking about mental health, a lot of illustrators out there who are expressing themselves beautifully, and really normalizing mental health. I think that's a big part of it for me, like especially kind of when I consider the charity side, like I feel like everyone should know that it's okay that they, feel however they feel, that they experience anxiety, that they experience depression, no matter what they feel and no matter what labels they want to put on it, they should be able to access help for themselves. So yeah, I started, because there's so many people out there doing amazing things, I thought, why am I going to waste my time creating my own content when I could actually bring together this movement of all the people who are doing, this already? And instead of having a voice here and a voice there, we could actually empower each other's voices. So we have this, I say this sometimes to people and I feel like it's so cheesy, but it's like you have one powerful song, and that way we'll be heard. So yeah, the posts are all from other beautiful creators, and I always put my own little twist on them. So I'll write a little poem, or I'll write how I'm feeling that day. So it just becomes a little bit more of almost like a journal of my own journey through mental health, but also tied to everyone else's work. And I've just been going for the past couple of years, and it's grown and grown. And, I think the fact that it's grown more quickly over the past year or so is a reflection of the times. And we're taking, some really cool new steps with it in terms of bringing together other people who are doing amazing things. Like you've got a fantastic podcast, like we should highlight that. Other people have got amazing devices, smart rings, and we should be able to, people should know about them. So it's kind of becoming this space now for people to access and understand what is on offer, in no matter what medium it might be, and get the support that they want and that they need.
So clearly you've got so many skills, your technology, and you amass groups of people, you're good with social media, but also you mentioned writing and poetry.
Yeah.
Is that a part of your own kind of well-being technique for you?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. It's really funny actually, because when I was a kid, I would, you're trying to find your feet, and you tend to do that based on what subjects you're good at school. And I remember being told like time and time again that I was really bad at English. And, especially I went to a really good school. So when they say really bad at English, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm that bad, but I felt like I was just not good at it, like that I just couldn't express myself through writing, and any way that I tried to write was wrong. And I think there have been moments in my life where, for example, different times when I've been abused, especially by my dad, or different situations with my work where you sort of find yourself going lower and lower, and I have no other recourse than basically writing, and I just do it, and it flows, and it doesn't need to be in iambic pentameter or whatever, you can just do it your own way. So I find that amazingly therapeutic, and also recently I do this little check-in with myself where I'll just sort of write like, hey George, how's it going? It's been a while. And you can really dive into that, and that's really powerful.
You mentioned early childhood. Are you okay to talk about some of your experiences, some of the difficulties that you've been through?
Sure.
You could start off with good stuff as well, anything that went well, but what were your earlier experiences like?
So I when you say like you can start with the good stuff, like there's really not that many good things.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I was speaking about this. I'm like we've mentioned. Oh no, we haven't actually mentioned, but that I do psychoanalysis.
Yes.
And
looking forward to getting into that.
That's amazing. I mean, that's like a whole other world. But I think, I always knew that I'd essentially blocked out the first 15 years of my life. I just don't think about them. I don't want to think about them. They're just sort of dotted with memories of abuse, and that's really it. My life kick-started when I was 15, 16, and I just was a teenager, and I was just going out and living my life to the fullest.
Okay, so prior to that, no outstanding positive memories.
You know, my
Or
earliest
was it blocked?
a lot of it was blocked.
Yeah.
But also a lot of it just wasn't there. I feel like I actually just almost just let it all slip, which is really sad, because something that I've realized is that I missed having a childhood. I didn't get to experience that. My first memory in my life is my dad coming to me when I was 4 years old, and he asked me, so me and your mom are thinking about getting separated. What do you think about that? And, you know, I just remember being sat down on my bed and just looking at him, and I don't know if I fully knew what he was saying, but from the way that he said it, I just knew that that was for the best, you know, and I just said, okay, you know, like that makes sense. Like they should not be together.
Did you have brothers or sisters?
I have 3 younger brothers.
Okay.
Yeah. At the time, I didn't, but you know, my mom wanted support, which is not really a good reason to have a child necessarily, but I think it's also understandable. And yeah, I was her rock, and I always will be. You know, she was essentially pure love, and my dad was, you know, kind of terrifying.
Are you able to delve in a little bit more into how abusive, what, to the extent that you're comfortable,
Sure.
of course?
Yeah, I mean, physically he was, but I think that the hardest part was emotionally. You know, just sort of never being good enough. Never. Sort of the way that he would control food. He had some kind of issue with food, I think, when he was younger, and wouldn't allow us to really enjoy food. So we would, you know, he would like, someone once brought over some like donuts as a celebration for someone's birthday, and it was like a family friend. And I just remember him taking the donuts, smashing them into the bin, and then like he peeled an orange and just started like pushing the orange peel like into the things, into the donuts, so that no one would go and take them afterwards. And he just took things to such an extreme, you know. I remember him pinning me down one time, and his sort of sweat was dripping into my face, and I said, you know, Dad, your sweat is dripping into my face. I tend to like make light of most things. Like it's just a bit disgusting, really, like at this point, Dad. And he was just like, eat it. And you're like, there's something not right.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this? And obviously I try to make light of it because it is so painful. But, you know, that's like a voice that I've kind of had to slowly but surely, like, you know, remove its grip from my mind, I feel.
So what early impact did it have? If like, how did it manifest these troublesome experiences and encounters and messages that you'd been receiving? How did that translate to either your mood or your behaviors early on?
That's a big question.
This is not replacement psychoanalysis.
No,
We'll get to your experiences soon.
But it's interesting because I don't think I've necessarily, you know, I think relationships have always been hard. Trusting people has always been hard. I also always felt that I was very, you know, I felt like I was quite different. I felt like everyone else had a family which was just sort of functional, and mine was the exact opposite. Often we'd, you know, go as a family to our friends or even our cousins, and essentially everyone would be arguing in the car. It would be like a completely like a disaster, And then we'd get to their house and suddenly everyone is sort of basically told to wipe their tears, put on a smile, and go.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think when you're never allowed to show how you really feel.
Right.
Yeah, I think, you know, you can see how it also like feeds into like a lot of the things that I do now, which is kind of funny. And yeah, and I think you're never really allowed to be vulnerable, which has been a really important lesson for me. Like even recently, like that's what I said at the very beginning. Like it's, again, you know, like I think you probably get this at every stage in life where you realize, wow, I need to be just that little bit more vulnerable and a little bit more. And every time you're kind of like taking off these layers. And I think that for the most part, when I was a child, I still had them all on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So unpeeling these layers, I suppose, is kind of come with psychoanalysis. Tell us how you got into, like, how did you seek one out, and tell us about the journey in psychoanalysis.
Yeah. So actually, the reason why I started to do psychoanalysis was because I'd had my own mental health crisis a couple of years ago. You know, whilst working on the business, on Feeliom and on How Mental, I'd moved abroad and I wanted to start my business in Lebanon. And my family's originally from there, so I had my grandma and I had other people who I love there. But like, you know, starting a business can feel like a very solitary journey. And you know, at one point I kept pushing and pushing, and I realized that why am I pushing so hard? You know, why is this whole thing so hard? And I questioned what the purpose of this was, questioned whether I even had a purpose. And I actually realized that life has no purpose in and of itself. And that was a really big lesson for me, because I kind of had always felt like there was this great wind behind me, sort of like powering me through. And, you know, you go through all this kind of trauma in childhood and it's kind of pushing you, and there's a reason, but you don't know what the reason is, and you kind of keep going. But when I realized that there was no reason, however, even if life has no purpose, we can actually provide it with purpose. It was kind of, it felt like a big burden. It felt like either I can see my ability to provide my life with purpose as a kind of magical superpower, and, you know, I can give this conversation purpose, I can give, you know, childhood abuse purpose, I can give the fact that I was a little bit, you know, late on my way here purpose. You know, everything can have a purpose. But at the same time, when you're so low and you're so drained and there's no one really around you to support you, you're in an entirely new environment. I mean, everything just sort of hit the fan, and that was when I went into my own depression and my own suicidal tendencies, which I find kind of amazing, because I've provided that with purpose in terms of the work that I do. You know, like I had to go through that. I had to know what it meant to be that low, to know what kind of people I'm helping today. And so I got through a lot of it myself. And at first I was really proud. I was like, wow, like I'm doing this all by myself. I'm still standing, like I'm still here. And then I realized that there actually was no point in like sort of having pride for doing things by yourself. And I really wanted to get better. And a friend of mine, who's one of my best friends, she had her own problems when she was younger, and she'd done psychoanalysis since she was 13. So she was like, listen, George, I wouldn't recommend this to everyone, but I feel like you can do this. And I said, it sounds fantastic. So I started doing it about 6 months ago now. So it's not been that long, but it has been probably one of the most incredible experiences. Like I guess you come into therapy with a lot of misconceptions, a lot of social ideas about what it is. And especially with psychoanalysis, it's particularly interesting because it's every single day, you know, like.
So how many times a week do you go?
So 5 days a week.
5 days
yeah,
a week.
Yeah.
Consecutive days.
Consecutive days.
For 50 minutes.
For 50
each
minutes,
time.
exactly.
Wow.
9 a.m. every day, I'm there. And it's, well, now you go through a whole journey with it. I mean, I don't know, you know about psychoanalysis.
I do, but for those who don't,
Yeah.
what's your experience of it actually? Are you lying on a couch?
Yeah.
Is your analyst behind you?
Yeah.
Blank screen?
Yeah.
And how is that?
Yeah, so literally lying down on a couch, analyst is there, you don't see them. You see them when you come into the room, but you're essentially staring at the ceiling and talking to the ceiling. And intermittently you get this voice, almost like the voice of God, but it's not. It's the analyst behind you just going like, and, you know, actually like he doesn't even say that much. So I'll be talking and rambling away. And the thing with psychoanalysis is that there's just one rule, which is that you have to say everything that you think, which is hard, especially when you have like multiple thoughts going in different directions and you're not used to it. So
it's the rule of free association, whatever comes to your mind, and just being able to talk freely and openly.
100%, which at the time was really important for me because coming out of suicidal tendencies and this kind of depressive period, my identity was extremely fractured, and I felt extremely anxious when I was speaking. I didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't really trust the words that were going to come out of my mouth. So being in an environment where the only rule is to say everything that's on your mind, it was like exactly what I needed. So yeah, and then the kind of free association for me has been, I think, probably the most important quality of it as well, you know, beyond actually having to say the words, because it means that you can go anywhere. You know, it means that the therapy isn't sort of limited to what's happening in the present moment or, well, anything really. Wherever your mind needs to go, you just go with it.
Yeah.
And I feel like in that way, you can kind of unlock all of these boxes that you never would have gone to if you had a sort of structure.
And it's such a unique type of therapy. I mean, obviously, it came before other therapies like CBT, which is quite popular nowadays. So it's very different. It's very different in its style, and so things like CBT, which is, we know, structured and goal focused, doesn't happen at all in that sense. Have you had experiences of other therapy at any point, or is this your only one?
This is my only one. I mean, I've read about CBT, so I understand how it works, but I've never actually experienced it for myself.
Yeah, and just to say also, psychoanalysis is less common now than it was before.
Yeah.
It's kind of so wonderful that you managed to seek it out. And so it's kind of empowering you, it's giving you more of a voice. The vulnerability side, is that something you've discovered because of it as well?
Of course. I mean, you just have to let go of that barrier. Even when you really want to say something awful about the therapist or the analyst themselves, you have to say it, you know, and otherwise you're sitting there thinking of that thing, and they're very aware that like you're just sitting there not speaking, and that it's probably about them. You can kind of make, especially once you've formed a relationship with them, Although that is also a really interesting part because the relationship is like completely one-sided. I'm, I have to call them by their like, Mr. whatever. I can't call them by their first name.
Yeah.
It's a really focused environment. And I think for a lot of people that can be hard because they want a response.
Yeah.
You want advice.
Yeah.
But that's also something which I've kind of found has empowered me because no one can necessarily give me advice which is directly related to me. And so for me to essentially have to figure out my own problems has to be the most empowering thing that could happen.
Yeah.
And yeah, so and I think actually in terms of the vulnerability, going somewhere every single day has meant that it just, on those days when you think there's no point in me going in, like I am hungover, I am not going to be able to say anything. You just go and you never know where it's going to take you. And I've actually had some of the best analysis sessions when I'm really hungover because you actually end up being, or I mean, when you're in these kind of different physical states as well, you end up unlocking different parts. And I think I was speaking with a friend of mine once a while back, and it was a Saturday morning and we were on our way out of London, and she'd been drinking, another person had been drinking, and everyone was kind of coming into this train hungover, and then we realized actually it's a very sensitive state, it's a very emotional state. So no matter where you are, even if you're feeling very closed off or you're feeling very vulnerable, feeling very sensitive, you go in and you open up.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of Therapy Lab. If you feel ready to transform your life with therapy, we're offering 10% off a first session with any therapist on harleytherapy.com to our listeners. Just use the code TherapyLab when you book your session on harleytherapy.com. So how long do you envisage continuing with psychoanalysis for, do you think?
That's a good question, because you're meant to do it for about 2 years minimum. I really want to do that. I really want to keep it going. I think that's something that I've realized as well, is like having that routine. And you were saying you're a very habitual person. And when you have that routine, it's almost like a workout for your mind. I go in every day and I'm like, this is my time to get my mental fitness on. And I do. And I think that everyone should have that space where they can go to just express. So yeah, I don't want to stop it for now. Maybe at some point in time it'll, be more difficult. I don't know, if I have a family, whatever, things change. But for now, I'm happy to
continue,
see where it goes.
And speaking of difficulties, what have been the hardest times in therapy, and what have you come up, what challenges have there been in psychoanalysis?
I think at the beginning it was really hard because you come in and obviously you're skeptical about the entire thing, and I kind of realized at one point that I was projecting so much onto my therapist or onto the analyst, and that was really hard because really I could probably count the number of words that he says in a session on my 2 hands. He doesn't say that much. I mean, sometimes he'll say a couple of sentences like, oh, it seems interesting, but realistically he doesn't say much. So everything that I'm feeling is not actually him, it's me. So I had to really push through that and understand why I was feeling these things. And and that was a sort of a much broader, understanding that basically everything is coming from me. So as much as you might want to blame someone else,
Right.
it's probably coming from you. And then I think beyond that, it's probably been he sort of, when he does say things, I really, they tend to be like pieces of gold. And there was one time I told him that I was drawing really fluidly on the back of some bag someone gave me, and I felt really good about it. And he was like, that's what we want you to be doing all the time. Like we want you to essentially be that fluid and not judge yourself. And I embraced that, because a lot of what I've been through, and a lot of the things, even what I mentioned, today, was about not really having a childhood. A lot of these characteristics about being a child, about being, free to play, to be curious, to not judge yourself. Those are the kind of elements that have been the most core. And that's what I'm kind of trying to keep bringing out of myself.
Well done you. It doesn't sound like an easy work, like 5 days a week. Run us through, if you can, a typical day, because you have so many different aspects to your life. You start off how in the morning before you go to your therapist at 9?
So
Analyst.
I actually, what do? I try to, this is something I'm trying to get better at, which is my sleep. So I am trying to sleep from 12 to 8, and then essentially wake up fresh, have my coffee, go see my analyst. So it's really like, I don't like to think too much. I like to go there and feel like I haven't really thought about anything. And then I get there and I'm quite open. So I go in, I do my analysis, and I go into my workspace. So I work from Somerset House, which is a beautiful space.
Nice setting,
It's and that's been a really important change for me as well in terms of where I'm working. It's kind of the perfect combination of quite artistic and at the same time quite business oriented. So everyone there is very creative, very authentic. And so I work from there.
Yeah.
My first step would be to make my list of what I need to do. You'll see that I'm not really like, I don't like to plan that much at all apart from what I'm doing that day. So whether it's How Mental or Feeliom, I tend to take one or the other. It depends on, where my business partners are. I'll tend to coordinate with them. And so I choose one for the day. I will always end my day with a post for How Mental. And afterwards, I'll go back home, I'll do my exercise. So whether that's yoga or HIIT. So, and I do them from an app. For me, doing my workout from home is really essential, because I don't like to go to the gym. I hate the gym. It's not an environment where I feel like, like I can just focus on myself. So yeah, I like to do it from home. And I have like my favorite apps. So one is Fit, which is for the yoga. Like really, really good.
You were mentioning how much you're a fan of yoga as well.
Yeah, I love yoga. And it was actually through this app that I first got introduced to it. So I was blown away that you could actually have an experience where, the teacher felt like friendly and nice, and it was done through, and it was recorded very well, and it was done through your screen, and yeah, so I thought it's really accessible, and so I started doing it from that. Yeah, yoga for me has been an entire experience of essentially being grateful for my body, knowing that I haven't really inhabited it for much of my life, haven't been aware of it, you know. I think I probably actually distanced myself from my body for a lot of my life. You know, we live in this mental world, and then to come back down and realize, oh wait, I actually wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this thing. So had some powerful experiences where I just sort of realized that my body should be able to do certain things and it's not. And the fact that I'm still here and that I still have a chance to rectify that, you know, is something that I'm going to take. So yeah, I'll do that and have my dinner and hopefully see a friend, or if not, do some writing. I'm writing a book as well. Yeah, because there wasn't enough things to do.
Quite. And the book will be on?
So the book is actually a sci-fi novel where it's all about, I think it's quite hard to explain, but I think at the end of the day it's about empathy and helping people to realize that we have a lot more similarities than we have differences. And but it plays out obviously in outer space, as you know, everything does, and it's quite fun.
Very creative. Well, you are just doing so much. Thank you for giving us an insight into your busy world. How do people get a hold of you? We know Feeliom.com. How Mental is at How Mental.
At How Mental on Instagram, or howmental.com as well.
Yep.
And you can email me on george@feeliom.com.
Great, excellent. Well, we'll look forward to your book as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'll be sure to keep you posted on it.
Very good. Thanks so much, George.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Therapy Lab. To find private, affordable therapy in person around the UK or online by video from around the world, visit harleytherapy.com today to start therapy as soon as tomorrow. If this is your first listen to Therapy Lab, do hit subscribe to keep up to date with new episodes. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, and all good platforms.